There was a Spanish film. I'm not 100% sure that I remember the title right now, but I think it was like REC, as in record. Do you know which movie I'm talking? Yeah. Okay. What do you think about that movie? Because I thought it was pretty good. Did that do anything at all for Spanish or Latin horror at all? Or was it in the, just same old in your opinion?
No, I think it was really well received both in Latin America, overseas, and in the U.S. It did really, really well in the U.S. by word of mouth because it really was a film that really kept you on the edge. I mean, it was a simplistic plot in a sense because you're really tied into a building. You have these Walking Dead, which is another take on the zombie genre. But then again, they did it very well with the roving camera, as it were, and still being able to find character development. You knew who the tenants were. You knew who the neighbors were. And even when they did, somebody did a cameo as a zombie who was already dead and probably was killed within the first 5 minutes. The way that they set up the scene when they went into the apartment, you got a sense of who the tenant was. So, for instance, there's a scene where they go into this room and there's this old woman who probably is a grandmother and had been living alone, and she comes at them, and they're forced whether they're going to shoot her or not because, of course, it reminds them of their grandmother. So, just by the way they set up the scene, it gets you because you're sympathizing with this living dead person who is now trying to attack you. So it's that kind of storytelling which I think is very engaging. And I think the director, who is Juan Balaguero from Spain, did an excellent job in putting that together.
Do you see any upcoming trends of what everyone's going to be making movies of, say, in the next 5 years? I mean, will everyone keep doing the teen angst vampires? Are they going to be going a different direction? Werewolves, people doing movies now.
I think it's already going to go in a different directions because even with these, Twilight and all these other teen vampire films, which have been around now for a little while, if you think about it, for at least 3-4 years, all we've been talking about is vampires. But there is kind of also a little bit of a backlash starting to develop where you're starting to see people, again, doing serious vampire films. And the first thing that they say is that we're not doing sparkly vampires. That is to say, we're not doing the little, good looking, perfectly manicured teens. We're going back to the bloods and gore. And actually, Guillermo del Toro just put out some books called the Strain Trilogy. The second one just came out, which is a fall. The Strain, which is the first one. They'll put out the third one next year. And in that one, he goes completely back to, your very vicious, no-holds-barred vampire. So I think that also it's going to go the other way. It's going to go first back to your more traditional vampire, but probably amped up a little bit where they're going to be more vicious. And I think the next step, it's going to zombies. I think that there's a little bit of a wave turning to the direction of zombies being the next big thing for the next couple of years.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been a while since we saw a lot of good ghost movies in the theater.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, is that just, they just blew over that one to stick with, werewolves and zombies and vampires?
I think that what's happening is monsters are in again. It became, the thing where it was about hatchet men and people being killed in the woods and young teenage boys and girls in the woods on a camping trip and their car breaking down, this or that, and being chopped to pieces. But I think now we're back where we were in more or less the 50s and 60s, where it was about monsters. And I think we're there for a little while, at least the next 2 or 3 years.
Okay, this is kind of a little divergence, but I just was really curious to ask you if you have a favorite horror film, and what would that be if you did?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my all-time horror film is The Exorcist. That film, I saw it when I was a teenager, and it has stayed with me all these years. I have it on DVD. I used to have it on VHS. When I came out on DVD, I got it on DVD. Talking about the subject, we just did a screening of the film a couple of days ago where it was shown again for the first time in 10 years on the big screen. And Latin Horror formed a group, kind of a meet and greet with its members. And we met at the theater here in New York City on 14th Street, Union Square, and it was a wonderful time. It was a restored, extended edition, and it had been rescanned, so you can see it a little bit more clear, to the point where you can see the makeup more than you could years ago, on either the VHS or DVD, because it's been remastered.
Behind-the-scene footage, I thought was as impressive as the movie itself, what they were showing, how things were done.
Yeah, they did a behind the scenes. And I think part of the deal is that it's part of the publicity that's being built up for the release of it on Blu-ray.
Okay.
Okay, are we ready for some totally different questions?
Sure, go for it, Pia.
Okay. So, you are also a cinematographer, and I have questions about that because I have tried to be, doing stuff on my own, film some stuff and whatever, and I suck at that, okay? My question for you is, and I'm trying to be a writer too, and I suck at that too, but as a cinematographer, okay,
yes.
I recently decided I was going to join a class for regular photography. Okay.
Correct.
In your mind, how does regular photography, understanding photography, and all this and that, how does that help when you're trying to be a cinematographer setting up for a shoot or whatever? And also, can a regular photography class help a writer understand how to write visually? And is it something that you can learn, or are you born with it, or you're screwed if you're not?
No, I don't think that you're screwed if you haven't been born with it, because I don't necessarily know that I was born with it. What happened to me was that when I was about 12 years old, I used to go to the boys clubs here in New York City. I was a member. My mother put me there so I could go there after school in the Bronx where I grew up. And I started taking classes there because they had a darkroom. And so I don't think it was something that I was born with, but I've spent a lot of time over the years learning the craft and fine-tuning my skill set. But in terms of your first question, which was how does photography help you in transitioning over to a cinematographer, or does it help? And I would say it's somewhat indispensable, and I'll tell you why. The thing with doing 35 millimeter photography, and you have an advantage these days because you can spend a lot of time shooting digitally, which isn't the same expense as when I was starting out, where every roll of film I had to take it to the lab, get it processed, get contact sheets and then prints. As long as you have on your camera, and I would say instead of buying a lot of lens, if you first want to invest in a zoom lens, which is a variable focal length, which probably goes from, let's say, 24 millimeters to, let's say, 80, somewhere around there, or maybe a little bigger or below that, from wide angle to telephoto. It helps you a lot in that it allows you to see optically how a shot, one, the field of view, which is what you see in the frame, how you crop it, depending whether you zoom in or zoom out, or whether you step back or get closer to the subject, but also the differences of how things appear when you are shooting something with a wide-angle lens versus a telephoto lens or a zoom lens. Because when you're shooting something with a wide-angle lens, the perspective is quite different. You're going to see more of what's in front of you. More things are going to be clear both in front and in the distance because wide-angle lenses have more depth of field. But when you zoom into something or use a telephoto lens or a prime lens, which is a telephoto lens, doing the same thing, you're going to see that your foreground and background get compressed a little more. One of the areas that telephoto lenses or zoom lenses are used quite effectively in action films, horror films, is you'll notice when a car is about to hit, let's say a little girl is crossing the street and a car is about to hit her. Well, if you are far away and you zoom in on the action, the car could be 20 feet away, but because the distance looks compressed on the lens, via the lens, on your focal plane, on your recording plane, it looks like one thing is on top of the other. So the girl could be 20 feet in front of the car that's about to hit her, but it looks like it's almost on top of her. The other good thing with telephoto lenses or zoom lenses on the far end of the lens is that you also get what's called shallow depth of fields. So if you focus on my face and there's a tree behind me, that tree is going to be a little bit more blurry, which is one of the tricks that people use quite effectively in film, which is called selective focus. So I think getting into photography and learning your optics that way, it's invaluable to learning cinematography, because you go in with the knowledge of what cinematography is all about, which is the language of the image. And, you can learn it that way, I think, very effectively.
And you think actually that having some knowledge of that may actually be good for writers too?
Absolutely. And I'm sorry I missed that part of your question, but yeah, absolutely, because I think that what writers are doing, film is about the moving image. What we're creating is images. There's dialogue in it, yes. There's music in it, yes. But foremost, if you take everything away, a good screenwriter should be able to write a film that doesn't include dialogue, doesn't include music, and if you take both of those away, you still should know what the story is about through the visual, or you should get a very good sense of what it's about. And I think that when you start learning photography and what your angles are, it's no different than a comic book. If you look at a comic book is nothing more than a storyboard with some dialogue printed on it. But if you take away those little balloons that they put in with the dialogue and what action is happening, which are your descriptions, you still can flip through a comic book and see what's going on. You can tell that someone is lurking in the shadows, or that someone is saving a woman in distress, some superhero, or there's a villain plotting against the earth. So it's the same concept. So I think for screenwriters, if you think visually, you'll write better descriptions and you'll make more engaging film, and your script stands a better chance of being picked up and optioned, because people are going to be engaged by the imagery you're connecting to them. You're already creating the universe of what it is. Now, the director, of course, is going to flesh that out and have his own or her own ideas. But if you create rich images, you're 90% there.
Thank you very much, because I think that was an excellent answer to that, actually. Thank you.
How much of a screenwriter's imagery do you think really makes it to the screen? Do you think most of it, or
I think a great deal of it, because if you an effective screenwriter, as you guys know and you gals know, is in there. I mean, you don't have to write a lot of thick descriptions for you to create a wonderful image. But I think that as writers, one of our jobs is to lay the initial seed of what's possible within that moment. And of course, that will guide the director, and the director is going to have his own informed decisions. And is going to bring other things if they do their work well and research what the subject is. Of course, they're going to come across things that maybe the writer didn't think about, or he'll enhance images that are already on the page. But I think it should already, to a certain degree, exist on the page. And in most of the scripts that I've read, there's always some degree of the image that's to be produced later on the page.
I looked you up on IMDb, and it said electrical. Is that lighting, or is it just running cables?
No, not really. I think what happens when you look at either electrical and crew on IMDb, what they're following is kind of the credit sequence of film. So when in that department, you'll have gaffers, grips, electricians. But my field of work for many years has been working as a cinematographer.
Okay, so is the electrical part of lighting then?
Of course it is, yeah, because you'll have.
Do you have any? I know this has nothing to do with screenwriting or anything like that, but since I'm trying to personally, get better at this stuff, and I have come to realize really fast that lighting is another area where I totally suck, because it is an art. What do you have anything to tell us about that?